Younger people are getting very frustrated with the current system because they're just as well educated, better educated than I was, that's for sure, willing to work just as hard, but they can't even dream of affording the same sort of lifestyle that we were able to afford. And the reason, again, this is my opinion, is because central banks changed their focus. Monetary policy used to be about establishing the conditions for the most efficient allocation of capital, about productivity growth. It then changed to asset prices.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Paul Musson, who shares why the financial system is breaking and what to do about it. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Quick announcement before we get started. We are now expanding our offerings, and my wife will be doing tax preparation along with tax consulting and tax planning specifically for business owners. So if you're a business owner looking for those types of services with somebody who will actually answer your phone calls and provide you advice in a way that you understand, reach out to me. I'll connect you and we'll help you get started on your tax planning for this year. So let me ask you a question. What if the pressure you feel around money isn't because you're doing something wrong? It's because the system is. There's so many capable, responsible people who followed the rules. They worked hard, they saved, they invested, and yet life feels more fragile than it should. That's our conversation, and we're going to go straight to the heart of that tension. My guest is Paul Musson. He's an investment veteran with over 30 years of experience, including leading the $10 billion Mackenzie Ivy funds. After decades inside the system, Paul now focuses on something different, helping people understand how money actually works. Through his podcast and blog, Political Economy, Paul cuts through the jargon to explain forces shaping our money, our future, and the growing sense that something isn't adding up. His work gives people a voice by unpacking what policymakers are doing and what we need to start demanding if we want real, lasting change. This isn't about market tips or predictions. It's about the difference between money and capital and why entire generations feel squeezed and how to live a rich, grounded life, even when the system feels stacked against you. Let's meet Paul and see how it's done. Welcome to Richer Soul, Paul Musson. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Rocky. I'm really happy to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, so growing up, I was very much a loner. Anxiety, wouldn't leave the house a lot. Back then, you would never be diagnosed with that. The prescription was snap out of it, that sort of thing. And so I spent a lot of time on my own, and thus a lot of time thinking about things. you know. In terms of money, I mean, we were middle class, I guess. Yeah, middle class, I guess. We were growing up in Montreal. I was born in Wales, but grew up in Montreal. And my parents taught me most about money through scarcity or scarcity of the money. And, we would have a little bit of allowance and whatnot, but, life was tough. Both my parents were working. We were first renting an apartment, and then they were renting a townhome and then able to afford a home back in 1972. But yeah, life's not easy. Everybody's doing their thing. And so what I learned about money, really, I learned about on my own and not really until much later in life. I was very naive about the concept of money, didn't even know what I wanted to do for a living. Even when I was 25 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a living. I was in university, just taking different courses. And then things slowly started to happen. So we're all on our own course, path, timeline. That's why I tell young people, don't worry about what other people are doing. This is your path. Don't keep comparing yourself to everybody else. Are you happy? Are you pursuing your dreams? Are you working hard? Are you working towards it? All that kind of stuff, and you can have a lot of fun along the way.
I think that's harder now because they see much more comparison today than we ever did when we were younger. Your comparison was whatever was on TV on the 3 channels that night, not
Yeah.
and it usually wasn't, if you think back to the 70s, other than maybe the size of the house, somebody making a lot of money versus somebody not making a ton of money still had a very kind of a lot of similarities between them
Mm-hmm.
in the way that they lived. There wasn't this dramatic shift with the luxury level that there is today. So I think, you knew they might have had a Cadillac, but
Yeah.
again, a Cadillac was still nothing but a fancier Chevy, right? It,
I know,
it
that's
wasn't
right.
that dramatic of
Yeah.
a difference.
Yeah. True. True.
So is it because you were more of a loner that you found the love of philosophy and history, or was that just your natural bent? And
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I just know that I love both. Always loved watching history on TV. Hated reading when I was growing up, but then came to love it. And even when I was in university, I never really had good marks, primarily because I never really applied myself because I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. So I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to get home from my classes so I could read about history or philosophy or the classics or geography or nature. I'm a bird watcher as well. And so just this thirst for knowledge. And well, it's like that line, Mark Twain's lines, that I never let school interfere with my education. And now school is very important. You need to go to school, but you learn a lot more outside of school and the things that you choose to do and learn and think about and read on your own. So, yeah, really, ever since then, I've just had this passion for. I read all the time, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
I think that's shifting though. I think school has lost its place in a sense of it used to be highly valued. And I think more and more so today, the economic results aren't so great. But even at the regular public school level, there's a lot more coming out, especially in the last, I would say, maybe barely 10 years. And I don't think it's even talked about enough because it's so recent. The kids are graduating unprepared for college,
Mm.
unprepared for basics of math, and the colleges are going further and further remedial. Again, it depends on the university. Harvard's not going to let you in, but they're only going to accept a tiny percentage of people. And that's true of a lot of the other top universities. But once you get outside of that highly competitive, it's not a great world anymore.
Yeah, well, that's a shame. And are you saying not prepared academically or emotionally or both?
Probably both, but academically, there was some recent stuff of a California university that literally the kids are coming into college with middle school math skills. And I'm hearing it in other places that what's happening is it is easier for the teacher just to pass everybody. And if you're just passed along and everyone's just passing you, even if you don't know what you're doing, you're never going to, hey, by the way, you don't know math.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not helpful.
No.
There's a good book called The Coddling of the American Mind. I have a free blog, weekly blog, and as part of that, I review a book. So I'll review a couple of chapters each week of a book. And I reviewed that book earlier this year. And it's quite unsettling, the direction that the country has gone in.
And that is not a recent book.
It was pre-COVID. So it might have been 2018 or something like that.
Right. So 7 years ago, which means that book's data was probably 5 years before that.
Mm.
And so if you think about it, yeah, you hit a tipping point.
Yeah.
And it goes down, But you didn't study philosophy in school, did you?
No. Like, I don't want to overplay the philosophy part. I used to read some philosophy and I like to think that I am philosophical in how I live my life. I think about these things, not all the time, but I do. And I like to think about, the moral aspects of what it is I'm doing. And at the end of my blog every week, I also do an audio of it. And I finish every post with be free and do no harm. Mm-hmm. And that's all I say, because I don't want to be prescribing, what people should be doing with their lives. That's up to them to determine. But I think we should all be free, and I think we can tell people to do no harm. And if more people just thought about that, just thought about being free and ensuring that they're not doing any harm, either physically or emotionally, financially, or whatever, that would take care of a lot of the world's problems. It's not very complicated. It's hard to do, but it's not complicated.
Life is pretty simple. Doing simple is hard.
Yes.
It's just what it is.
Yeah.
So you started out, you've talked about college. You started out working in a video store, and then somehow you ended up managing billions. How did that journey occur?
Yeah. It was a circuitous route, I will say. And I had no idea that I was going to end up managing billions of dollars. I was very fortunate. But I had moved to Toronto just looking for work. And I was literally sleeping on a hardwood floor of a bachelor apartment. No mattress, nothing. On the floor. No chairs. And my first job was in a video store at nights. And I was 29 years old. That's how I got my start in Toronto. And I had a few months of rent money. That was it. And then I got a job at an insurance company, just clerical stuff, sorting out colored papers and stuff it was a 6-month position. It became like permanent, but then I got laid off. And then I became an assistant to a stockbroker at Wood Gundy, Christine Timms. She sort of gave me my first break in the finance industry. I'd never done that job before, and boy, it's a baptism by fire, I tell you. You got to learn fast if you want to survive. And so that's what I did. I learned fast, made friends. I was dependable, did a good job, friendly. All these things are so important. People around you, they don't want to be working with a jerk, right? And you spend a third of your waking hours during a week with these people. It's a lot better if you like them and you get along and you can trust them. And then, when it's time to move on, those people will often help you. And so, yes, I was there for a couple of years, and then I got a job on the institutional trading desk at CIBC World Markets. I was institutional equities, but all these things that I did, I really didn't know that they were going to happen. Like, I didn't say, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do this. No, Like I said, I want to analyze businesses. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but I'm just going to do a good job along the way wherever I go. And I was there. I had a great job there for maybe 5 years, I guess it was. And then one of my clients, who was a mutual fund company, they hired me. And then I finally got to do real analysis on businesses, which I absolutely loved. And that was my career. I ended up going to another mutual fund company called Mackenzie Investments, and that's where I spent most of my career. Amazing company, amazing people. And a big part of what, when you're a portfolio manager managing money, it's not just about managing the money. You also have to manage the expectations of your clients, of your sales team, of your bosses, educating people with respect to how you manage money and why, what to expect in different market environments, what's going on in the economy, keeping it real, all this kind of stuff, where you're engaging with people and giving them confidence and helping them with their business, right? That's what it's all about. How can you help me with my business? And it was just so much fun, and so yeah, so I was very fortunate.
When you have work that's fun, it doesn't turn into work.
Well, yeah. Is that another Mark Twain quote? He said, "Find a job that you love, and you'll never work a day in your life."
I don't know if it's Mark Twain or it sounds like something Warren Buffett also said or
Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe it's
similar, but
Buffett. Yeah, yeah,
it's one of them.
yeah.
So, knowing what you know, you've got three daughters. They're in their 20s, right? And everyone
Mhm.
talks about how the young generation's struggling to build wealth and so forth. You've got massive knowledge in this space, and we're going to talk about that. Before we do, though, how are you dealing with them and helping them in learning about money and how all of this works?
Well, to be honest, my wife and I never really sat down with our girls and gave them a lesson in money and in budgeting and in saving and stuff like that. What we did do was we were very hands off with our girls because we were always afraid of trying to steer them in a direction that we thought was appropriate. But how can we know what's appropriate for them based on, you know what I mean? I mean, they're going to tell us what they like and stuff. So what we did was try to give them the tools to the best of our ability so they could make their own decisions for themselves. And so things that we did, clamp down on, I would come down like a ton of bricks. Things like manners, courtesy, respect, honesty, compassion, empathy, and if I, hard work. Don't believe in the something for nothing myth. Yes, you're a special person, but you're not more special than all those other people there. All people are special and deserve that consideration. So my wife calls it like the splash of cold water in the face, like just when you think you deserve better than I come along and say, well, no. And so, and that's a life, not lifelong, but that was a many years of reinforcing all that stuff. And because it's human nature to sometimes go the other way. And then leading by example, just how we spend our money and, try not to get into debt. I mean, obviously, if you're buying a home, you need to take on debt. Most people do. Most of us do. Or you're buying a car, but pay that debt off as quickly as possible. Don't run up balances on your credit card. Sometimes it's unavoidable, if there's an emergency situation that you have, but try not to let that happen as part of your general lifestyle because that's going to catch up with you really quickly. And so that was our approach. Whether it was right or wrong, I don't know. I mean, our girls have turned out fantastic. We're very proud of them. But yeah, that's what we did.
And I'm assuming it's turned out well as they get started in their lives.
Yeah,
They're
like
not sleeping on the floor, right? With no
no, no, no. That and each of them had a very different journey. And, Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes you do the side shuffle for a while. And but the most important thing I think that we could do was know that we were there to support them emotionally, financially, if need be, until they were financially independent. And don't judge, and know that no matter what was going on in their lives, that they could tell us anything and that we would not be disappointed in them. We might not be happy, or we might be sad that they're suffering or whatever, but we will not be disappointed. So things aren't working out. What do we got to do? We're all in this together. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far, and one that there's no way in hell I ever could have predicted.
You're an investment manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the key. You can't predict the future.
Exactly.
And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And be comfortable with the fact that, hey, I can't predict an unpredictable future, but it doesn't mean I can't prepare for it and be ready for it.
Exactly. And that I've actually used that exact example many times talking with a lot of my clients when they would say, well, how can you invest if you don't know what GDP is going to be next year, or which way interest rates are going to go, or what inflation is going to be, or what the money supply will be? I said, I don't have to. So, and I liken it to our daughters. And so we gave them all these tools of honesty, respect, empathy, blah, 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 hard work. And we didn't know what each of our girls was going to face every day when they walked out the front door, who they were going to encounter, what situations they were going to be involved in. But because we gave them what we thought were the best tools, and they developed those tools on their own, that I was very confident how they would respond to each of these situations I didn't know would happen. And that's all you've got. Right? It just gives you so much confidence, too, about what they're doing in their lives. And it was the same thing with my investment team. It's very important that you had like-minded people who believed in your investment philosophy and would put the client first. And so we didn't need all these risk controls within our team to force people to do the right thing. I knew what they were doing every day, trying to do the right thing for the client. If you got to have all these rules in place, then you've got the wrong people. You know what I mean?
That's very true. Too often we don't think about those types of things. We think about, can they do the job, or does their skill set, not their values and how they fit into the culture and everything else. And that's a big part of it. You started off with very little. I'm assuming life has turned out well if you're an investment manager managing those types of things. Was there a point, though, where you realized that the money wasn't going to make you happy?
I never really thought about that because I was happy all along. Like I've been happy for a long time. Some ups and downs, obviously, but I'm a very happy person. And I've got some friends and some family say, why has this happened, Paul? And I don't really know, to be honest with you. So I never thought of pursuing the career I did so I could get money to be happy. I was already happy. But who doesn't want more money? Right? It's pretty good to have. But very importantly, you can't put the cart before the horse. You can't, I guess it's what you're getting at. You can't assume just because you're going to have money that now you're going to be happy. And so in my career, in my career progression, there was all kinds of stuff that one I didn't get into, but there were at least 3 times where I was offered significantly more money to go do something else. And one of them, I was offered 5 times what I was making at the time to go do something related in finance, very related actually, and I turned them down. because it was not, don't need to go into the reasons, but it wasn't what I wanted, and it wasn't sort of on my long-term path where I knew where I eventually wanted to be. And of course, my wife and my mom, take that goddamn job, but they grew to learn that, he seems to know what he's doing, and that over time, and it wasn't very long before I was making even more than 5 times what I was making back then. Not that I knew for sure that that was going to happen, but it wasn't necessary for that to happen because I was going to much more enjoy this. This was part of really what I wanted to do and grow and learn and build something. And then financially, we'll see what happens. And, there's no guarantee, of course, but I was fortunate.
It all worked out, which is nice. So let's talk about the markets, the economy, building wealth, and all of those types of things. I think what's starting to finally come into awareness is the situation that a lot of countries are in. It wasn't caused by COVID, but COVID exaggerated it because the amount of money countries themselves borrowed and dealt with. But all along, and I don't know exactly how far it goes back, but for probably at least 30, 40 years, maybe more, the Fed has constantly intervened, at least in America and throughout the world, in Japan and England, everywhere, with our economy and the markets and so forth. And I think people are really coming to see how the value of the dollar is drastically falling away. You might think that houses are expensive. It's not that houses are expensive. It's that your dollar is becoming less and less valuable. Yes, they are expensive, but that's one of the things that we're seeing. I know you've done a lot of work in this space, so I'm going to kind of open up the conversation and let you maybe fill in some of the history of what you've seen and where we're at today. And then what do we do? And we can get more into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you. So before I go back and explain how we got to where we are, it's very predictable, by the way, and then what to do about it. There are things we can do about it. Unfortunately, it will not be without pain, more for some than others. But before I do all of that, it's very important for your listeners to understand that there is a difference between capital and money. The two are not the same thing. So capital is what makes the world go round. Capital is anything that people produce, either a good or a service. So you have your podcast, Richer Soul. It's just capital you're producing, and your listeners then consume it when they listen to it. So the example I like to give is let's say you make bikes and I make suits. You make a bike, I make a suit. We both created capital. There was no bike or suit in the economy, and we both now created one of each. And importantly, it didn't come at the expense of anybody else. Free market capitalist system, you're only supposed to benefit to the extent that somebody else is benefiting from your actions. It's not supposed to be at the expense of someone else, which we'll get into in a second. So you make your bike, I make my suit. We exchange the capital with each other. That's called direct exchange, barter, like a barter economy. Now I've got your bike, you've got my suit, off we go. Everybody's happy. But we don't do direct exchange. We do indirect exchange through money. So money is called the medium of exchange. It just means that we use money to exchange all the capital that we're producing in the economy. So you would sell your bike, let's say, for $1,000, and then you might use $1,000 to buy a suit from me. So far, so good. So now, to really bring home the difference between capital and money, let's say you make 10 bikes. And again, they're nice bikes. You sell them for $1,000 each. You've got $10,000 sitting in your bank account. But you're not spending the money yet because you're saving it to go on a vacation at the end of the year. But before you can spend your $10,000, the central bank doubles the money supply. Now, when the central bank doubles the money supply, what they do is they print money out of thin air, or they create it digitally out of thin air. They don't create capital first to obtain that money. It's created out of thin air. So it's got no capital stored up in it, but it obtains capital. As soon as that money comes into the economic system, it obtains capital from the rest of the money that's already in existence. So it takes 5 of the bikes from your $10,000 and puts it into the newly printed money. And so now your bank account statement says that you've still got $10,000 in your bank account, but it only stores 5 bikes instead of 10. And now your $10,000 will only buy half as much stuff as it would have done before the central bank doubled the money supply. That's how the central bank can take your capital from you without your permission. Bless you. So the government can take your capital from you in one of 3 ways. It taxes you, and so that's all above board, of course, and we vote for what we think will be an appropriate level of taxation. The government can borrow from us, so we can lend our money to the government. Again, that's all above board as well. But they also take your capital from you every time they increase the money supply. And this, I mean, it's very pernicious as well. It's like the hidden tax or the backdoor tax, a lot of people. But it's a tax just as sure as regular income tax is. So, and that's why my book, by the way, is called Capital Offense. They take your capital without asking you every time they print money. So it's capital offense, why some benefit at your expense. And it's written in very easy to understand language. I use analogies and stuff like that. So you don't have to be in the industry to understand this book. So now, in my opinion, where things really started to go awry was back in 2001. So now you may remember that we had just experienced that dot-com boom in the late 1990s. And stocks got very expensive. I mean, there was a lot of really good stuff going on in terms of the internet and .com, and productivity growth was strong, but stocks got, way overblown, as they usually do in these sorts of things. And so they got very expensive, and then the whole market crashed. Now, when the stock market was soaring, that created a wealth effect, what central banks like to call a wealth effect. So people see their stock portfolio going up in value, they feel wealthier, and so they will borrow on their stock portfolio or sell some of their shares and use that money to go shopping, and that contributes to GDP growth. GDP is a measure of all final spending. Now, a lot of that wealth effect was real because companies were increasing productivity. There was more and more capital being produced in the economy, and stock markets were rising to reflect that fact, a real wealth effect. Now, there was a fake wealth effect as well, as stocks were just getting expensive. When it all came crashing down, there was a negative wealth effect, as you might expect. My portfolio is going down. People, I'm not going to spend as much. My portfolio just got cut in half. That's not good for GDP. And then you had a couple of commentators like Paul Krugman and Paul McCulley from PIMCO, who recommended that the Federal Reserve should start or create a new wealth effect in the housing market, drive housing prices higher. More people own houses than stocks. And if they see their housing prices going higher, then more people will feel wealthier, borrow on their home, extract equity from their home, and go shopping. And so the Federal Reserve took interest rates down to 1%, despite the fact that the economy was still growing. Interest rates at 1% would have been considered emergency levels. There must be either there's a war going on or in the middle of a Great Depression or something like that. No, nothing like that was going on. They took it down and they kept it at very low levels for about 3 years to drive housing prices higher and create this fake wealth effect. So sure enough, housing prices started soaring, people extracting hundreds of billions of dollars from their home and spending it, SUVs, flat screen TVs, whatnot. And that was very good for GDP. And Alan Greenspan used to talk about how many hundreds of billions each quarter or each year was being extracted from homes and contributing to economic growth. But the trouble with this is that house prices going up. Remember I said earlier, stock markets going up. If companies are creating more capital, that pushes share prices higher. That's a real wealth effect. But when house prices go up, there's no new capital being produced. So my house here in Mississauga, which is a suburb of Toronto, we bought it in 2001, and it's now 4 times higher than what we paid for it. So why do we deserve to make money on our home? Why do we deserve to make 4 times on our home? What capital was created by our home over the last 24 years? None. Our house is not producing 4 times as much stuff as it was back in 2001. It hasn't increased 4 times in size. It hasn't relocated to a luxury type location. It's the same economic good. That a younger couple or a newcomer to our country has to pay 4 times what we paid for it. So it's a redistribution of wealth within the system from a younger couple's bank account and into our bank account. And this is why younger people are getting very frustrated with the current system, because they're just as well educated, better educated than I was, that's for sure, willing to work just as hard, but they can't even dream of affording the same sort of lifestyle that we were able to afford. And the reason, again, this is my opinion, is because central banks changed their focus. Monetary policy used to be about establishing the conditions for the most efficient allocation of capital, about productivity growth. It then changed to asset prices. And then they doubled and tripled down on it after the global financial crisis by printing trillions of dollars through QE1, 2, and 3. And so they, in my opinion, they sacrificed the mainstream economy on the altar of higher asset prices. And they did this not because they're mean-spirited, not because it's a conspiracy theory. I believe that it was all good intentions. They thought that this would be good for the economy, and somehow the benefits of all these soaring asset prices would trickle down to everybody else. Well, it didn't happen, and it will not happen. And theory as well as practice will tell you that it wouldn't.
This episode of Richer Soul is sponsored by the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you're a business owner who wants to scale and grow, increase profits, or want to have strategic conversations around your financials, then check out the podcast. You'll learn how to work less, increase cash flow, increase profits, and build reserves to help you weather storms. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. There was some other side effects that people are not aware of unless they're in those markets. And the two big ones that occurred during that time were the syndication market in real estate, in which people were going in, buying what they called undervalued buildings. In the beginning, they were doing real upgrades and bringing them up to market and then renting them. And by increasing the value and the cash flow of the property, they then were able to extract more money and grow it. Towards the end of that, we call it lipstick on a pig. They were doing very little.
Yeah.
But that whole market, because they never imagined not living in a 1%, 2%, 3% market, the moment interest rates went up, they got crushed. And a lot of those deals have come under considerable strain. Properties are being sold at fractions of dollars, or the properties are being sold because the underlying business that was there is falling apart because they can't make the payments at the new interest rates.
Yeah.
And so there was a whole thing in that. And they, of course, drove rents through the roof.
Yeah.
The other marketplace that made massive inroads during that same time was private equity.
Mm-hmm.
Private equity went out and bought up what I call smaller big business. So smaller big business is, companies with 30, 50, 100, 500 million in revenue, not your mom and pop stores.
Yeah.
And they bought up these companies because there was no cost to capital.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3% is no cost to capital.
Mm-hmm.
You can leverage the crap out of these things.
Yeah.
And the moment they come in, they, of course, start optimizing and raising prices and doing all kinds of wild stuff. That has gone to the point where everyone goes, well, why is there all these new car washes? Private equity. Healthcare. In the United States, a lot of healthcare has bought up by private equity. A lot of the trades, like the HVAC, the heating companies, the remodeling companies, all the larger companies in that space have been bought up. And all of these companies are using systems that tell them how to price. Well, if everyone's using the same pricing system, it's literally causing the prices to dramatically go up in those particular markets because it's a sense of a collusion. Although the two companies aren't colluding, the system that they're using is saying, this is what you charge for rent. This is what you charge for doing these types of work. And if everyone's doing that, then that's what it is. And I think all of those things are really they're squeezing everyone. They're squeezing the small business. They're squeezing healthcare. They're squeezing the consumer. And at some point, they're all going to explode because working for them is no fun. They are slave drivers. I don't know if you've noticed that as much in Canada as we have here, or your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, it's not my area of expertise or focus, to be honest. I mean, I read the same stories, I see the same headlines, but I think it's all part of a greater malaise, which is the financialization of the American economy, or developed economies in the Western world for that matter. And I think central banks are the main culprits for this. There has to be a cost of capital for an economy to function. And then when you take interest rates down to zero, it causes all kinds of speculation. And particularly when so many of the players know that if they get into trouble, that the Federal Reserve will come to their rescue and bail them out. And so when you distort asset prices by taking interest rates down to zero and driving housing prices higher, you distort the price discovery mechanism of markets. And when you do that, capital gets misallocated, gets suboptimally allocated in the economy. So productivity growth starts to grind lower. And then you have a proliferation of zombie companies. So zombie companies are those that don't produce enough operating profit to even pay the interest expense on their debt. Never mind pay the debt back. They can't even pay the interest expense. And back in the 80s, this is according to the Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, back in the 80s, maybe 3% of companies in developed economies and in stock markets were zombies. And then just before COVID, I think it was up to 17 or 18%. So these are companies that destroy value. These are companies that have been able to avoid the creative destruction process because central banks took interest rates down to zero and channeled capital to them, allowed them to survive, to continue to destroy capital, which is good for them, but it's not good for the economy and it's not good for people in general. So or companies taking on debt and buying back shares. So there are a lot of good companies out there, don't get me wrong, a lot of good management teams, but so many have shifted their focus to the share price rather than the customer value proposition. And so when they wake up in the morning, their first thought is, what's my share price doing? Not how can I wow my customers? What do I need to do How much do I need to invest to make sure I stay ahead of the competition? That my value proposition is much better than the competition. And that's the way an economy, like if a free market economy is operating properly, you should have falling prices. You should have what's called good deflation. Because what happens is companies, let's say you make bikes, and there's another company that's making bikes. So you've got to reinvest in your business to make your bikes even better, but at the same cost, or make the same bike, but make it cheap, like have your production costs go down. So now you can lower your price a bit. The benefits of investment and free competition should always accrue to the customer. And this is what you had in the US the last 30 years of the 1900s. You had 30 years of falling prices because the productivity growth went through the roof and the money supply was only just over 4%, growing 4% per year or so on average. And so you had steadily falling prices. So even if you have a steady wage, a flat wage, every year you become wealthier because your flat wage will buy more and more stuff because the prices of that stuff is going down. That's the way it's supposed to work. It doesn't because the central banks increase the money supply faster than the economy can increase the amount of stuff that's being produced.
And that's been going on for the last few years. I think COVID really accelerated that. And they waited too long to stop.
Yeah.
And now you're still seeing it. And I think, the horse has gotten out of the barn. What do we do at this point? How do we protect ourselves?
Well, the reason I wrote my book is because I think the best way that we can protect ourselves is to change the system. There's only so much that you can do in our current system to protect yourself. And so that's why I've written my book in very easy to understand terms. I use lots of analogies and stories because the average person, when I say average person, I don't mean average intelligence. I think the average person is very smart, particularly when it comes to what they should be doing with their own hard-earned capital. So there's a saying that the people always get the government that they deserve, i.e., you voted them in, so stop complaining. Well, no, that's only true if you actually understand what's going on and then vote accordingly. But I don't believe that most people understand what's going on with respect to our monetary system and how an economy truly functions. And so they're not getting the government that they deserve. And this transcends politics, by the way. And I think that, and both sides do the same thing. But people can see that it's not working. They can see wealth disparity is growing. They can see government debts going through the roof and deficit spending. They can see that housing prices are going through the roof and I can't afford to buy one anymore. And they can see inflation is much higher than the government actually says it is. But they don't understand how it's happening. But everybody needs someone to blame. And the reason is they need someone to blame is because the people are not doing anything wrong. They're doing all the right things. They're going to school. They're working hard. They're doing everything they were told that if you do this, you're going to live the American dream. But it's not happening for too many of them. And so you look for someone to blame. Then I think it's natural that Democrats would then blame Republicans and Republicans would then blame Democrats. And I believe this is one of the main reasons why America has become so divided, and it's so sad. And as we were talking before we started the recording, I go down to the U.S. a lot. My mom and my eldest daughter live there. My brother lives there. My brother-in-law, and we know people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, and they're all beautiful people. And 95% of what they all believe in is exactly the same. Yet now they're being pitted against each other. This is my opinion. And so, in order to protect ourselves, I think it starts with an understanding of what's going on. Stop blaming your fellow man or your fellow neighbor or whatever, and demand better behavior or better decision making, I should say, from our leaders, our policymakers. And they will do it because they're good people. They want to do the right thing. But if policymakers did the right thing today, it would be political suicide, because we're not demanding that they do the right thing. We've been led to believe that we can have our cake and eat it too, that all this stuff is free. Just give me more. It all comes at a cost. If you obtain something from the economy without making a contribution, then it comes at your benefit, then has come at someone else's expense. You just can't see who it is because it's like 2 or 3 steps removed, right? But once people understand that, then we say to our politicians, okay, we don't want you making the popular decisions anymore. We want you making the right decisions. And they will do it. That's what I believe. And then in my second to last, or I guess my last chapter, I've got my 10 steps in the book about what we need to do to fix this. It won't be easy. We can do it. And it'll take time. But step one, which I should have put as step one, I didn't, is the understanding of what's happening, which is why I wrote my book and why I have my free blog to help people to read between the lines and cut through the nonsense and lift the veil of rainbows and buttercups as far as the eye can see. If we don't change our way, it will be changed for us. And that will be much worse than us changing it ourselves.
I don't see how you get people to demand change. And the reason I say that, I pay attention to financial markets. I pay attention to some of these different spaces, the real estate, the business, and everything else. And all they wanted, the Fed needs to cut rates. I'm like, the economy's booming. What does the Fed need to cut rates for? Everyone, cut rates. They don't care. They just want their fake assets to go up more. And they don't think about the consequences.
They don't. But I think it's in large part because they don't think that there are consequences. And, when I explain this to people my age, I'm 63. So I was at the tail end of the boomer generation. And I tell my friends about this. For the most part, they get it right away. They don't necessarily like it, but they say, yeah, you know what? I never really thought about it that way. You're right, But every now and then, I come across someone who not only doesn't like it, but will do everything in their power to try and rationalize away why they don't deserve to make money on their home. And they'll come up with all kinds of stuff. Now, have you ever heard of Upton Sinclair? He was like a socialist back in the 1930s, I think. And he had a saying that if someone's income depends on them not understanding something, then don't expect them to understand it. They don't want to understand it. They want to believe that they have earned what they have. And again, they're not bad people. They play by all the rules. They haven't broken any laws. And they were told as well that this is what you have to do and get on the housing ladder and you'll make a fortune and blah. So that's what they did. But nobody told them that you're taking more from the system than you're putting in. That's not capitalism, right? And, I'm here to tell them what's really going on. And so, I'm not too popular with certain people. But I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
But there's a lot of people who are making money with this broken system. And we talked about it. The syndicators were, for the longest time, even if they didn't know what they were doing, private equity is making a killing.
Yeah.
And the people working in it are making a killing. And the people selling out to private equity are making a killing.
Yeah.
You have too many people on the making a killing side. And then you have too many people on the just give me a handout side, so to speak, who think that if we tax the rich or, we give stuff away for free, that we're somehow going to fix this problem. Neither of those are going to work long term. It's been proven. I don't know how you get enough people to raise their hand and say, stop the lunacy. At least I haven't figured out how to do that.
Well, I think step one would be, you know, helping people understand what's really happening, and then we'll see. But I believe I do have great faith in people. You know, the vast majority of people, I believe, want to do the right thing, are good people. I see it around me all the time. There are exceptions. Well, so what? And 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 it's not, I mean, and the situation is worse than you think, because it's not just people who are making a fortune and making it like bandits. There are a lot of people, particularly boomers, who have done okay on their home, have done okay on their stock portfolio. They're not billionaires, they're not multimillionaires, but they have the savings tied up in that, and they're relying on that for their retirement. But because they were told to expect their house price to increase over time, that you can rely on that for your retirement, they saved less. I don't have to save as much because I'm going to rely on my home. And so what happened is that there's less savings and investment that went on in the economy than there otherwise would have been, which, in my opinion, led to lower productivity growth. So now, if you want to go back to a fair system, stock prices and housing prices need to fall. And that puts a lot of people, average people, in a bind, because they thought they're going to be able to rely on the value of all that to fund their retirement. And so that's not fair to them. But the only way they can have the retirement that they expected was to price the younger generation out of the housing market. So there are no winners here. Well, maybe there are, but it's so the question, I think the answer is not to sort of demonize anybody in this. It's okay. Some people will suffer more than others, and those who do suffer more, well, taxpayers can help. Governments can have policies in place to help people who really suffer because of it. But it's not government subsidies, it's taxpayer subsidies, right? Because governments don't create any capital at all. All the capital that they spend, they first obtain from the private sector. And so let's help each other out. And as I said before, it's not going to be easy. But but it's better than the alternative, because you could end up with a completely different political system. And particularly if you go the socialist route, which at first will look like it's working, but then you'll end up everybody will be much worse off. You think it's bad now. It'd be a lot more even, but everybody would have a lot less. Even those who are considered lower income would have a lot less, in my opinion.
No, that's very true. All of the markers say the housing market is overpriced. All of the markers say that the stock market is also very highly priced.
Yeah.
And, if you think back throughout your life, we used to have these regular cycles of boom and bust until the Fed stopped them from going into bust.
Exactly.
But yet it's the bust cycles where we clean up the bad mess. Exactly. And new and better come in. When you continue to bail out failures, it creates a problem where people expect to be bailed out. And they take extraordinary risks because there is no downside in their world. And so, unfortunately, I think the only way through it is we're going to have some down times. Now, the smart people are going to prepare for those. Just like you save up the squirrel saves up their nuts for winter. Winter comes, I think people have forgotten that we have seasons and cycles.
Yeah.
And if you prepared for it, you'll be fine. But if you didn't, then I think there's going to be a lot of struggling amongst that. And the reality is, I don't think the government has more money to give away anymore. And they have until a point. There's a certain point where the bond market tells the government, and it's happened recently, that We don't trust you anymore.
Hmm.
And when that happens, it's all loss of control. The Fed no longer has control, and I think the politicians, they're just going to do whatever. It's not going to be pretty, unfortunately. So all I say is be prepared. The worst that happens is it doesn't turn out so bad and you're okay.
Yeah, and I think you should be prepared, but you can't live in fear either. And
I
you know, and
Yeah.
and and, and as I said before, I actually believe it's going to work out. I I do. There are so many good and capable people out there who want this thing to work out well, but it's not going to work out on the current path. Yeah, that's for sure.
I don't disagree it will work out. We went through the Great Depression and we survived, but it wasn't a great time while they were going through it. But here's the thing people don't realize. It's during times like that that people make a lot of money too. And even
Yeah.
in the '08 crash with real estate, a lot of money was to be made. We were buying real estate back during that time when nobody else wanted it.
Yeah.
When stocks go on sale, that's a great time to buy them, but you have to be prepared and
100%.
ready. That's all.
Well, and talking about people make a lot of money in these times, or some do. During the Great Depression, when unemployment got up to 25%, and the reason it got up to 25% because there were all kinds of policies that prevented companies from lowering wages. So prices were falling of the goods that they were selling, but they couldn't lower wages, so they were losing money. So the only offset release valve is to lay people off. And so that's why you had such high unemployment. The other 75% that were employed, their real wages went through the roof in the 30s. Like it was the real growth in wages in the 30s was the same in the roaring 20s. But it wasn't much fun for the 25% who had no work and were starving, you know?
And that was a time where we had more work. In
Yeah,
today's world with AI, with automation, with robots, there are certain states that said we're going to raise our minimum wage and we're going to really raise it for fast food workers. There's nobody at the counter anymore. It's a
yeah,
kiosk. I order on my phone. That is going to happen more and more. And I don't know how you return from that other than to figure out a new way to work. And I think we
well,
may go back to a more entrepreneurial type of thing where you've got to figure out how to make your own work. No one's going to guarantee you a job.
yeah, and that's entirely true. And there have always been periods of technological change, that put people out of work. So, when the Model T comes along, well, that wasn't good for those who are making saddles and horse carriages and stuff like that. And nobody's saying that it's pleasant for any of these people who get disrupted. Now, typically it happens slowly, fairly slowly. The AI thing seems to be happening very quickly. But people do adjust, and new jobs, new industries, come to the fore. So far, we've always found a way all through the Industrial Revolution to offset the fact that technological advancement put all these people out of work. And again, the adjustment is not pleasant, particularly if you're older. You've been doing like where you are, and like or the steel towns. It wasn't very pleasant for steel workers when all those jobs went to Asia. And if you're 55, a little tricky to adjust, right? And so that's where we need to be able to help and stuff like that. But you can't stop technology and advancement from happening just to protect jobs either. So it's not easy. It's not easy.
Not easy at all. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's one truth about success you wish more people understood?
That it really is about the customer value proposition. What value are you adding? How are you improving somebody's life?
And if you have a job, your customer is your employer. Don't forget that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And so I think a lot of people don't realize that.
yeah.
What's a lesson that cost you a lot but was worth every penny?
I would say so. I used to own a brew pub. So we had a full time brewer, and then COVID hit, and then our lease was up. We closed the business. So financially, it was not success or a success, but I learned so much about business because I was now on the other side. I was spent my life as an investor, investing in other businesses and analyzing how they were operating their business and thinking, oh yeah, this is what I would do. And now the shoe is on the other foot. And then you see what it's like to be part of a business and have staff and how great it felt to employ people and provide people with a living. I never anticipated that. That was so much fun and so gratifying. So there was, yeah.
It, it's amazing what happens when you actually put on someone else's shoes, right?
It's funny.
You get to understand what's going on because it sounds so easy from the other
Yeah,
side.
exactly.
Yeah, Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I think it would be that life is happening now. And, don't just live your life for something in the future, some ideal, perfect job, or I'm going to be making a ton of money. I was sleeping on the floor. I met my wife we met at work at the water cooler. Neither of literally met at the water cooler, and neither of us had a lot of money. Didn't know where I was going or anything like that. But you would have been hard pressed to find two happier people in Toronto at that time.
And that is nice. I will say I was guilty when I was younger for actually a good part of my life of always living in the future and not in the moment of paying attention to what was going on.
Well,
If
especially if
people
you
would
watch, I was just saying, like
go
if
ahead.
you, I used to film a lot of like home movies. So just everyday life, I'd grab the video camera. It used to drive everyone nuts. Now they're all very grateful and thankful. But when you watch those home movies now from 25 years ago, a lot of those people are no longer here. And, you know, although I spent a lot of time with them and tried not to take those times for granted, sometimes you do, right? Because you're so busy. Oh, I got another trip I got to go on. I got to work a bit of overtime. And my wife and I, that was our favorite motto: life is happening now. And do your best to live it as well as you can.
I think that's perfect. Life is happening now. If people would like to learn more about you and your book, how do they learn more?
So my website is called, well, it's to Paddington Capital MGMT.com or Political Economy. That's the name of my blog. So Paul, my first name, economy.com. And if you go to my website, you can put your email in there and you get a free blog post every week. And on there as well, I've got interviews like this from the past year. My book summary is there. And my book, Capital Offense: Why Some Benefit at Your Expense. You can buy it online at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Thrift Books. And we will have an Audible version on Amazon coming out very soon. We've finished all the recording. It's been edited. And so now it's just going through the pipeline. So hopefully before the end of the year, people will be able to listen to the book as well.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Rocky. It was a great discussion.
If you want to learn how to better invest your money, go back and listen to episode 346 with Todd Tressiter, Epical Change in the Financial Markets. This has all been predicted. We know it's coming, and there are ways to deal with it. Hopefully, you're not leaving here feeling anxious, behind, or questioning yourself. You're not alone. And you're not broken. The system is, and it's continuing to get worse. We talked about some of the ways that you can work through it and how to understand it and how to be more intentional with what you do. We don't try and outsmart the system. We just ride the waves that are there. We hope for the best and we work our way through it. If you know someone else who's struggling with this, do me a favor and share it with them. I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.